Hey everyone, thank you for joining. We'll be starting shortly. Appreciate having you on this webinar. We were having a little bit of intermittent connectivity issues, so if you're having trouble, please join us on YouTube. We've added that in comments. Give us another minute and we will get started. Very glad to have you all here and very excited about this topic. So I think I'm going to wait another few seconds. While we are waiting, I'm going to say hello to Doug. Hey, Doug, are you live? Can you hear us?
Certainly am. Yes, good morning and good afternoon, everybody.
All right. That's great. Looks like technology is working somehow. And we will dive into the webinar in just another minute here. In the meantime, if you're here and if you have questions, please do put them out on the YouTube Live or LinkedIn Live, wherever you're attending from. And we are monitoring that so we can answer them. I'm also running this on one of my computer. So if I see something here, I'll try to answer as well. All right, with that, we are at time. So let's get started. Hey everyone, my name is Saurabh. Nice to meet you. And let's get into Salesforce data compliance, data masking, and retention for financial services. This is a topic that's very near and dear to mine and Doug's heart. We've done a lot of work in this space. So let's dive right into it. I'm going to start with the usual disclaimer. This is not legal advice. Neither Doug nor I work for Salesforce. We used to, loved it, but don't anymore. We are partners. And so this is not Salesforce's point of view. It's just our individual perspective based on working with a ton of customers, all over the world. And again, we're not a law firm. So just take it for a practitioner's perspective, please. With that out of the way, thank you so much to all the awesome customers that have entrusted us in the past, now, hopefully in the future, where we've had the opportunity to learn and understand a bit about some of the things we are talking about. My name is Saurabh. I work for Cloud Compliance in GPT-5. We are a Salesforce App Exchange partner and very recently became a Microsoft ISV partner, and our applications are available through App Exchange and Microsoft's App Source. Um, so we have been in the data security business for now actually 6+ years, and we have 4 apps on the App Exchange, 3 of which are focused on data security, data retention, data masking, right to be forgotten. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is just informed by working with customers, their legal teams, their IT teams, their privacy teams, and getting a sense of what's important to them, what are the kind of challenges that they've seen. And fortunately, in the last year and a half, we have extended that same understanding and expertise into AI with GPT-5, which is our newest product on App Exchange that lets you bring AI to Salesforce without needing Data Cloud or Agentforce or other solutions like that. So, with that out of the way, one last slide. My name is Saurabh. I'm based in Chicago. I used to work at Salesforce. Doug and I are ex colleagues from there. And that's pretty much it about me, mostly an enterprise architecture kind of guy. With that, I will turn it over to my friend Doug.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Pleased to meet you. My name is Doug Merritt, and as Saurabh said, we both used to work at Salesforce. I started Platinum 7 uh, 4 years ago now. It focuses purely on Salesforce security, nothing else. So, we don't focus on anything else. All we do is Salesforce security, and I'm really looking forward to working with Saurabh again on this particular session and look forward to having your questions come through and looking forward to answering them as well. So, thank you much for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, moving on. Doug, do you want to take us through the agenda and rest of it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Saurabh. So, what we're going to be covering off today is a lot of information around how to basically keep your data safe and what risks are out there at the moment that we are seeing in both of our companies. Me doing my assessments and Saurabh helping his customers around security and what can you do to keep your Salesforce data more secure than it is today. So, everyone has a lot of interesting points, and we're going to be covering them off as we go through. But please, please, please ask questions as we go through. There is a Q&A at the end, but if you can ask questions as we go through, we'd really appreciate it. So this is the agenda. We'll roll on and get into it. So with that, let's go through to the first section, which is the PII and sensitive data risks area. So, Saurabh, this is actually one of your text messages I believe you received.
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about that. So, this just came yesterday while I was working on this deck. And what you can see here is this is a text message that says, I have a traffic ticket, which I don't, as far as I know, and I need to pay this. And what's interesting is it comes from a +63 area code, which is, I think, Philippines. And it has a link in it, which is not accurate, Illinois dash dot, whatever, right? And this is an excellent example of how social engineering has gotten at scale, right? They're trying to figure out every possible way for you to pay attention. And if at the in the spur of the moment you just click that link, who knows what happens, right? Maybe they download some sort of a malware on your computer or on your phone. Maybe they take you through this process, and a lot of people unwittingly just end up getting ensnared in things like these. So this is one of the hazards of social engineering, and it's only accelerating. And what you're seeing is like two aspects, right? There can be a bad actor in your organization, someone who deliberately does this, which is usually not so common. But the second part, which is much, much more prevalent, is the accidental leakage, which is something like this leaks it, or someone was committing code and they had credentials in their code, and they got now pushed to a GitHub repository, and maybe they were publicly, it was a public repo. So there's a lot of those kind of things that used to happen and still do happen. And the larger you are as an organization, the larger is the footprint of these kind of exposures. Doug, anything you want to add to this?
No, I think actually you covered it off a lot. A lot of folks um, think about making sure that their environment is actually secure, which is fantastic. But don't forget that your employees have to see data to do their job. And that's the challenge with accidental data leakage. The employees aren't necessarily being malicious. It's just that they accidentally do leak some data by maybe exporting a report and emailing it to the wrong person, that type of thing. So that would be quite interesting. Sort of like what happened with the Signal Gate in the US recently, where a a reporter was added into a top secret signal group, and that was accidental data leakage. So there you go.
All right. So let's move on. When you think of financial services in particular, what's interesting is just in general how vast is the exposure of information. So something as innocuous as your sandboxes have all kind of information. They may be business data, right? They may be unstructured data, emails that are coming through, financial plans that your client may have that they sent and are logged in. They may be personal data, social security numbers, driver's license, household information, commercial data around expansion, material non-public information, and then of course configuration settings and other kind of metadata, remote site settings, uh, credentials that may be in the org, metadata that points to other things. So there's a lot of information that covers this entire gamut. And as you look across the board, whether it's your full and partial copy, which obviously are chock full of all of this kind of information, but in addition, even what would seem really harmless like dev and dev pro still have a lot of information. They have user information. So if someone has access to a dev sandbox, they have access to your users. You're a financial services company with 15,000 financial advisors. Someone's got that list now, right? The very, very ripe potential of taking this list and trying social engineering hacks, putting it into some kind of a dialer or these kind of text messages, scams. So a lot of those spear phishing and all these other things that we keep on hearing about, a lot of leakage for that can happen from places which we typically think are kind of safe, and these things may not happen. And categorically what you see is none of this has got anything to do with the platform, right? Salesforce as a platform offers a ton of features, significant amount of richness in how you can lock it down, how you can do all these things that Doug and I are going to get into. But the exposure is that we have data which is mission critical running in a mission critical app, and that's what makes this so attractive for bad guys all over the world. Doug, anything you want to add to this?
Sorry, I think you've covered it off really well. One of the things I do think that people do forget is most of the time your sandboxes are not protected as well as your production environment. You maybe have not set up multi-factor authentication, or you haven't disabled most of the users in that particular environment. And obviously, we'll be covering this off later on, but protecting this information is key as well as your production environment.
True, absolutely. All right, with that, I'm going to move forward. What's interesting about financial services in particular is that, one, just by nature of businesses in this sector, right? So whether you're a bank, credit union, financial services, advisory, wealth management, regardless of where you're coming from, a lot of them are insurance and wealth management combined, right? Like, regardless of where you come from, these businesses are all about data, right? I mean, financial services companies don't have 1,000 tons of steel sitting somewhere. They have millions and billions of records of data. And that kind of data has a lot of sensitivity, which is inherently unique to this segment, right? There may be financial records, transaction histories, credit information, identity verification information, date of birth, social security, driver's license, passport, all of that. And add to that, there is a significantly higher degree of regulatory scrutiny that is around this information. All of that makes financial services an even more attractive target. So if you work or are associated with FinServ, if you have customers in this segment, this is the kind of risk that you're looking at, right? Much, much higher risk than someone who's doing, I don't know, B2B sales. So I think that's kind of the hazard that we're going to talk about, how you can lock it down. But this is kind of what we are all up against in terms of safeguarding and protecting our customers' information and maintaining our brand's trust. Along the same lines, what you also see is, as a consequence of all that valuable information, there is significantly higher degree of requirements around security, policy, and sort of PrivSec and InfoSec controls, right? You are required to have stronger access controls. Uh, a lot of these organizations are required by law to have encryption at rest, and Hyperforce and bring your own key for the entire org now is a fantastic feature that's just coming out, and Doug will talk more about it. And then you have all kind of regulatory things. Know your customers, Sarbanes-Oxley. If you deal with credit card information, PCI, Graham Leach, and the Australian regulatory act. So across the world, there is a significant amount of regulation that FinServ companies are looking at around guidelines, privacy, encryption practices, access control, and there is this really rich data set that every bad actor in the world would love to get their hands on. Doug, do you want to add any additional color to this, particularly around the Hyperforce encryption?
Yes, thank you, Saurabh. A lot of folks have implemented Salesforce Shield platform encryption. And as we know, platform encryption, when you encrypt individual fields, it changes the way that you can utilize that field in your Salesforce environment. So in general, it tends to break things because of the very strong encryption that it actually provides. So if you encrypt a field, that field can't be used anymore in a less than or greater than or contains query inside of Salesforce. So that makes it a little bit more challenging. Now, one of the things Salesforce realized was that is a bit of a challenge for some customers. They need to be in control of the key for encryption, but they also need to be not having any noticeable impact on the environment. So platform encryption doesn't actually slow it down at all. The key problem that people have is that capability loss. So what Salesforce did they've introduced uh, the entire org encryption. So what that will do is it will encrypt the standard Salesforce database under the covers, the whole org. The whole org gets encrypted with your key, and with that, it means that there's no impact to the capabilities at all. So your Salesforce org on Friday wasn't encrypted entirely; it was only individual fields. On Monday, if you've over the weekend spent some time and actually encrypted the whole org with this new capability, then you will not notice any capability change whatsoever. It's fantastic. It just works. So the capabilities are fantastic. The thing is, it's only available on Hyperforce, and it's currently rolling out. So you may see, if you have platform encryption, you may see you need to a new feature in the setup area, but it just says not available for your org yet. That will be coming out soon. It's a fantastic new feature for a lot of companies that do need to have encryption at rest with you in charge of the key. So back to you, Saurabh.
All right. So moving on, all of that is great, right? We talked about some risks, but there is a whole new set of things that are coming in front of us with thanks to AI, social engineering and phishing, which is voice-based phishing. So a lot of new sophisticated kind of threats are emerging, and a part of it is that AI has made it so cheap to do these things at scale, right? You can impersonate someone's voice. Just literally, this recording is probably enough for somebody to take and then start impersonating my voice or Doug's voice and then use it in different settings. So in addition to what we've already had to deal with in terms of security, in terms of social engineering, in terms of the data, the regulatory reasons, now you have a new kid on the block, a bad one, which is completely changing this game. And the challenge for most large and medium enterprises, particularly including smaller ones, the challenge for most financial services customers is that this is a new kind of landscape. The larger you are, the more resources you may have, but the more exposure also you have. You have 50,000 people. Guess what? Now, someone with AI has the ability to do more sophisticated social engineering attacks against those 50,000 people, probably for $100, $200, right? So there is a lot more dangerous stuff that's starting to happen and evolving. And we'll dive a little bit into how we address them from a Salesforce data security perspective. But before we go there, Doug, anything you would like to add to this?
I think we're seeing this already. There's a lot of press around people using deepfake AI to actually do impersonations of senior people in companies or even recruiters, and getting developers to click a link to actually install a fix for a non-existent audio problem on Zoom, for example. These types of threats actually exist and are out there in the wild today. So this artificial intelligence capability can be used for good as well as evil. And unfortunately, the baddies have got a hold of it. So what we're going to be talking about today is to try to help you minimize your risk to this particular capability. But one of the things you really need to do, which we're not talking about as such, is help educate your employees. Help your employees understand that the CEO is not going to be calling them to give the information out to somebody else. So just make people aware that things that you may not have thought possible, like your boss being actually an AI agent, are actually definitely the case today. So just be aware and make sure you educate your team. But other than that, I think if we move on to the next slide, Saurabh, we can start discussing this in a little bit more detail. So what we're going to be talking about is a two-step strategy to help tackle these risks. And I'll be covering a few of these off, and then we'll head back to Saurabh to cover off the rest. So on the left-hand side, we're talking about minimizing access. What can you do to minimize access to your employees, to just give them enough to let them do their job? Because if you do that, then what you're able to do is make the threat a bit smaller, because employees that have access to too much data, they can accidentally export a report, like I mentioned, and accidentally email to somebody they shouldn't. And that definitely becomes a data risk. So minimizing access is key. And the next one then, increasing your proactivity, means what you should be doing is working proactively to understand what you can do to protect your environment in the now. So deploying better sensors and alerting mechanisms, helping prevent data leaks. I'm going to talk a little bit about these as well. The image you can't see, my head's on top of, is API access control, and then shield and event monitoring, transaction security policies. So those two features we're covering off in a bit more detail. So on the next slide, we're going to be talking about the minimizing access. And to do that, what you need to do is to reduce the data footprint by using least privileges. So understand your personas in the company. So understand you've got your help desk people, you've got your salespeople, you've got your back office folks, you've got a bunch of different personas, maybe 5, 6, 7 different personas. And each of those personas has a different requirement to access data to do their job. And maybe some of them have to have read-write access, some just need to have read access. So your org-wide sharing is key to understanding what you should be doing. So Salesforce's best practice design guide says that majority of objects should probably be public read, but then some sensitive ones should be private. So things like account, contact, case, these should be private. And we're going to be sending out a link after the call to a data set that you can use with a whole bunch of good links in it to help you understand what you can do around these things. So we'll be sharing that in the LinkedIn post after this presentation. But org-wide sharing is key. Sharing rules. I've seen so many customers have private sharing, but then actually open it up to everybody with sharing rules. So if you're not going to be private with the org-wide sharing, why? It just doesn't make sense. So basically your sharing rules are there to break the org-wide sharing rules, but use them very, very judiciously. Make sure you're not overly sharing with your sharing rules. And then lastly, with your permission sets profiles, what you should be doing is just really reducing the data set that people can access just to what they are allowed to do their job, nothing more. A lot of the times I see that people give everybody broad access. In fact, one of my customers in an assessment recently, all of their employees were basically system admins. And they had 190 of these system admin users, which is completely not right, because if you're giving people system admin rights, you're basically breaking the rules all over the place, giving people way, way too much access. The next one is also multi-factor authentication. Salesforce has enabled that automatically for everybody in production, but in your full and partial sandboxes, it's not. So you should go through and enforce multi-factor authentication for username, password logins in your Salesforce environment underneath the identity area of your setup tree. So MFA is key. Now, if you're having single sign-on, your single sign-on tool should do MFA as well. But you should set it up so that if anybody does log in with the username password, they should be having MFA as well. And then lastly, don't use system admin profiles for integration. This is something I see so often in my assessments, because what you're doing is you're giving that external access full permissions to your Salesforce environment, which means they could deactivate all your users. They could take all your data and then delete it. They could do anything they want because you're giving them system admin. Yes, it makes integration easier, but it's definitely something you don't want to do. You should be using the new Salesforce integration user license with minimal access. So if the API requirement is just to read accounts, give them just read accounts, nothing else. And that's something I think is very important. So looking at the next slide, what we're going to be talking about is how we can work towards making the data controls much more important. So classifying and categorizing your data is key. So as you can see on the right, the ability for you to have a data sensitivity level, which this list can be customized, by the way. This is the standard Salesforce one that is given to you, but you can customize it. But your sensitivity level is a one setting for this particular field. And this is on a field by field basis. So this particular field could be confidential as a data sensitivity level, but its compliance categorization can be multi-pick. So basically this field could be PCI requirement. So it's a credit card number. It could be HIPAA and GDPR because it's a health data and it's there for the user's name, for example. So PII, HIPAA, GDPR, PCI, COPPA, and you can add to this list as well. So these settings that Salesforce give you in the metadata are actually something you should be doing to each of your fields. Now, the user interface capability for this is a bit of a challenge, but Salesforce recently purchased Own Company, and that means they received Own Secure. And the capabilities of Own Secure are very, very powerful in this area, and that's been added into the Security Center feature of Salesforce. So the ability to easily classify your data is there for you now if you have Security Center. I think most financial services customers were looking at Security Center as well as a feature to add to your Salesforce environment. So you're going to be getting this automatically. So fantastic, great news for moving forwards. So I think Saurabh, I think you're going to be covering next a bit more about your data retention. So I'll hand over to you.
Certainly, and I think that this is a great slide. I really like this one. We've done a lot of work in this space. In fact, a number of our products, I think all of our products on the data security side, are now able to benefit from this. So if you have data in Salesforce, which you have tagged with compliance categorization and data sensitivity, you can then automatically leverage these for data retention, for data masking, so that your policies can really look at this. And what I like about this approach is then all you have to do is, if you create new objects, new fields, you just want to make sure that you have governance internally so that you apply a sensitivity level and a categorization on it. And then that way, you can make sure that they get picked up for data retention, for sandbox data masking, if you do write to be forgotten portability, for all of them. So it's a very, very good feature to benefit from, and it's part of the platform. You get it for free. You don't have to buy anything to enable that. So I would highly encourage you to look at it, especially in financial services. There is a lot of data governance that's already happening. They have a lot of information internally about how they want to treat these pieces of information. Connecting it back to Salesforce makes it remarkably easier for your organization to do that. All right. So with that, we actually do a lot of work in the data retention space. This is back to begin with. If you can reduce the amount of information you have to safeguard, your risks automatically go down, and that's kind of where data retention comes in. As you're looking at here, you may have a policy where you want to mask contacts after 5 years if there's no business that has happened with them, and you can have different policies based on different regions, different privacy regulations that apply. This is particularly very, very true for Europe, because even under GDPR they have specific nuances of it based on various, what country, what region you are in, what's the nature of relationship with the person whose information this is, so law, legal basis, and all of that. And what we are doing is, at Cloud Compliance, we have spent the last 6 years building a lot of these things that you can essentially automate, so that you have the ability to automatically run data retention, and you can run it completely on platforms. Your data never leaves your Salesforce org. Your data residency, all of those kind of regulatory requirements are already addressed that way. So yeah, if you're interested, check us out. We are on the App Exchange platform. The second part of this, and actually I think a much, much more important aspect, because most people have their production pretty tightly locked down, the second part of it is kind of the one which I have seen a lot of companies struggle with, which is around sandboxes. Your sandbox may be super secure, and you may even have deliverability turned off, but then somebody is doing some testing and they turn it on, and before you know, 50,000 people got a test email. Not only is that bad for your brand, but for a lot of organizations, specifically in financial services, that would be considered a data breach. And now you have to go through the whole motion, all the paperwork and explaining what happened, and go through maybe an audit. Not fun. So my one recommendation to every customer I speak with is, get data masking. Make sure you mask your platform, mask your Salesforce org. We are on App Exchange. We have Data Masker, which is our product, but you could buy it from whoever. But definitely, when you think about it from a regulatory standpoint, even if you may think you don't have very sensitive data, which may not hold true for FinServ, you really, really want to make sure it's completely masked, and you have a lot of ability to mask specific to fields, based on formulas, based on regular expression or patterns. You can come up with values that are realistic, or you can come up with just junk kind of values that are like system generated. And like this one here is a good example where we are just generating some values, and great way to test scalability in your load orgs. But if you have full copy sandboxes where you're running UAT and you want easier names and all of that, you can do that with data masking. Really, really great way to dramatically reduce the overhead and the security challenges associated with it. So I know we have a bunch more slides, but before we go there, Doug, anything you'd like to add to what I've just added here?
No, I think masking is very, very important. Actually, there's a question that came through, and I'm currently typing an answer to it on LinkedIn. But the masking capabilities are definitely there because you don't want to have your production data in multiple places. It just makes it harder to protect. So using Data Masker is something I would strongly suggest looking at because its capability of doing very, very good anonymization of data in your sandbox so that it looks like production data, but it isn't, is something which is very, very important. Because as I said before, multi-factor is not turned on by default in your sandboxes. So having production data in your full copy sandbox is another area where it could be leaked from. So as you said, Fin's customers especially have got so much sensitive data in there. Data masking is, I think, a mandatory thing to have in your sandboxes.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. All right, moving on. So it brings up to yet another interesting area. And I know, Doug, this is one of your favorite areas to talk about. So I'm going to let you, you have a lot of experience. So please go ahead.
Right, thank you very much for that, Saurabh. So API access control is a feature that Salesforce has, but it's not activated in every org by default. So what API access control does is it will protect you from people connecting dodgy connected apps or using the API to access your Salesforce environment. And that's very important because there are so many bad actors out there today that are trying to get your data and using the API and tricking your users using phishing or vishing, as we mentioned earlier, voice phishing, is something which happens a lot. Now, the API access control is a feature which will help you prevent that, but it's not activated by default, as I mentioned. You need to log a case with Salesforce, get this feature activated in your org, and then what you need to do is set it up so that you go to all of your connected apps. You then look at them because these are apps that your users have actually installed. And by default, Salesforce is auto allow. So anybody can connect any app they want to your version of Salesforce. And that app has now got their permissions to access all the data that they can see. So this is the reason we talked earlier about minimizing data access. If you minimize data access, it means that the attack surface is a lot smaller. The data that can be extracted is a lot smaller. So API access control will help you block people from connecting apps to your Salesforce org by default. It will also stop people using just the regular connection via the API. So with that, you need to install all of your, there's a feature called install, and it's a bit of a misnomer. Install doesn't mean that you are actually adding the app to your Salesforce environment. What it means is you get the ability then to manage who can use it. So after the app is connected, so let's say Salesforce Data Loader. Salesforce Data Loader lets you extract all the data you can see in Salesforce. So you don't want to give that to everybody, especially users who've got a lot of access. So you should only give it to a certain number of system admins who need to do that particular work. So to do that, you install the Salesforce Data Loader app, and then you grant access to only a certain number of users using permission sets. And that way you're controlling exactly who can use a permitted app. So the permitted app is Data Loader, and only 3 people in the whole company can use it because it's set up in the connected app configuration that only this particular permission set is able to access a particular bit of information. You should do that for every one of your apps that you have inside of Salesforce. There's also a good way to stop people using Salesforce mobile apps if you don't want them to. So you can actually block it by using this as well. So if you go through and you install each of your apps, you then grant permissions to a small number of people who need to use that app. And then when you enable access control, API access control, anybody who tries to connect any other app to your org just won't happen. It can't happen, which means that one of your salespeople who want to use a card scanning app that is actually now stealing all that information, they can't connect it to your org. It just doesn't work. And then if someone wants to use Data Loader, it isn't on that list. They can't use it either. Now, this is something I seriously suggest that everybody should be configuring in their Salesforce org. Every time I do an assessment, if you haven't got API access control, that's one of the critical findings. You haven't got this enabled and it's not set up in your org. So that one is something which is a very, very important feature which you should have configured. The next one is transaction security policies, part of Salesforce Event Monitoring, which is an add-on product to Salesforce. API access control is free. Just got to ask Salesforce to turn it on for you, and it's there. But transaction security policies are something that I actually sell to my customers because my policies use the data classification we just spoke about. And as Saurabh has in his company, we both use the classification of the fields to control what goes on. So, for example, if you've flagged all these particular fields as being PII, personal identifiable information, then my policies will stop you exporting reports that have PII on them. And that means that you can control exactly what can be exported in reports to just non-sensitive information. Now, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I can do much more than that with my policies, but just take it as a simple example of you can't export PII. And then people say, oh, but what about having an override? Well, I give people capabilities for that as well. But basically, without having transaction security policies, there is no way that you can stop people getting data out of your Salesforce org that have permission to see it. You can block all reports if you want to. That is one way of doing it, by blocking report exports, just stopping people from doing exports of reports. But that stops them doing their job, because if you want to then do maybe a heat map on how many people use your product across certain postcodes or zip codes, then you can't export zip code and maybe the total spend. Both of those are not PII information. A zip code in the UK, in the US, a 5-digit zip code is not going to be street level. The extension on the end, the 4 digits, yes, you shouldn't export that. That's a street. But even so, the zip code, 5-digit zip code, plus the amount of amount of money they're storing in your company is not really PII information. You should be able to export that and do some reporting on it in Excel and load some information back into Salesforce. So the ability to block reporting is a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut. You should be doing more nuanced capabilities with transaction security policies, and we'll in the slide deck we're handing out afterwards, we'll have a bit more information around them as well. So these two, I think, are mission critical. You must have them to keep your data safe, and without them, your data is at risk from being exfiltrated either accidentally or on purpose with a phishing campaign. And API access control can help stop that. So thanks, Saurabh, for letting me get on my little soapbox to talk about these. But these are something I think are very important features. So over to you now to talk about the next steps in keeping your data safe.
Absolutely. And I appreciate, Doug, you sharing this. I think API access control is one of those very underrated but extremely powerful feature that Salesforce has. I've worked on Salesforce for almost 13 years now, maybe more. And I love how thoughtfully some of these things are designed. There's always scope for improvement, but some of them are features that if you work with enterprises, even if your customers are smaller, some of these are things that are just really good security hygiene, right? Like as Doug mentioned, doesn't cost you a dime to turn on API access control. Totally worth having it if even Shield or something else is not something that your customer is thinking of using. So with that, let's talk about the shiny new toy in the world, AI, right? So there's a lot that's been happening in the AI space, and I've been working on it for the last 2 years with customers. And it really boils down into three profound areas. There is the trust and security layer that you've probably heard about from a lot of people. There is the bring your own LLM idea with zero retention that you can leverage. And there is a brand new thing that we've just incorporated in our products called semantic masking. And all of them exist because a lot of our large enterprise customers are very, very concerned about security when it comes to AI. So whether you are considering Agent Force or you're considering GPT-5, which is our App Exchange solution, all of them offer you ability to do some degree of some of these things. I'm going to talk a little bit more on this predominantly from a GPT-5 perspective and what we are doing, but some of it is interchangeable with Agent Force and other options you may be considering. So just a little bit on what we do in this space is we are a Salesforce App Exchange partner, and GPT-5 is our product that lets you bring your own AI model or your LLM and you can do that without using data cloud or agent force or anything else, right? So you just buy GPT-5 and you're able to connect to your internal LLM infrastructure, whether it's running on OpenAI, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, AWS, whatever. And we basically have a full-blown prompt engineering platform, very, very heavily focused on security because that's the DNA we come from, and it lets you have AI across the enterprise. And we also then integrate with Microsoft Teams, Copilot, MS Office Suite, so you can invoke and pull all of this information from those as well. All right, so fundamentally, the idea of trust and security when you think about AI boils into a couple of different areas. One is, what do we do from inside Salesforce when we are sending data out to an LLM? And this is the classic security layer that we've built internally at GPT-5, and I know that Salesforce has one too, as part of the Einstein AI agent force thing, right? And the idea here is that before information goes, you're able to take out PII and sensitive data based on your configuration, and it gets masked. So instead of sending my actual name, we can send person one. Same with social security numbers, date of birth, email addresses, whatever it is that you're sending, you now have the ability to mask it, send it to an AI model, whether it's OpenAI, aka ChatGPT, or whatever else you're using. You get information back. We re-inject this, so we turn person one back to SARB, and then we can display that information, update fields, create records, launch flows, do whatever needs to be done, answer to Einstein chatbot or whatever the calling party of this is. So when you think about security and AI, the first area to think is this: data going out of Salesforce to some LLM and coming back. um, Access to this capability, again, all great Salesforce features are at your disposal: profiles, permission sets, the whole nine yards, right? But in terms of getting it out of Salesforce and bringing it back, you want to retain as much of this as you can. And we recommend this to our customers, even if they're using their own LLM, right? Maybe it is your Azure instance and you control everything there. You still do not want to send it out. So that just adds to that layer of security. The second portion of this is retention. So, with financial services, there is a huge need for auditability. So, everything that's happening, organizations want to make sure that they have full traceability of what was the information that was collected, what was masked, what was sent out, what did we receive, right? And we basically store all of that inside Salesforce so that from an audit standpoint, our customers can address those. And the reason I'm sharing this is, regardless of how you are approaching AI, whatever solution you build in house, by GPT-5, by Agent Force, by something else, whatever you do, these are areas to be aware of, right? So as you have all of this log of what actually happened, you can have data retention policies for it. We've built all of this inside Salesforce so we can automatically delete records, in this case in 20 days. You can do 0 days or whatever you want, and that way you can ensure that you have enough of a buffer in case you need to keep it for audit and traceability and production support and looking at issues, but you also are not keeping this information forever. So those are two very key areas. Before I go further, I'm going to take a second for a pause here and see if um, Doug, you want to add something here.
Thanks, Saurabh. I think the zero retention capability is very, very important for your AI stuff. Making sure that it's the ability for you to actually not keep that information in your large language model actually is very important. I think also retention otherwise in your Salesforce database is key as well. You should be getting data out of your database when you don't need it. So that's something I think which will be quite useful, and you do that today with cloud compliance. So that's a fantastic feature as well.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. All right, moving on. So the next part of this is very interesting, and it's actually a brand new thing that we've just added to our products. And the idea is called semantic masking, and it's something that is proprietary to what we do today. And the idea here is that if you have a sandbox and you are trying out AI there, but you still want to protect your sensitive information, right? So let's say you're a bank and you're trying out AI and you want AI to look at cases and all the case comment, and figure out if we responded back to a customer in a timely manner, right? Something as simple as that. But I don't want to send actual information, right? So I can use masking. All of these products have it. But the challenge is, if my masking significantly alters information, then the semantic, the meaning that is buried into that information is also altered. For example, back to our use case of, did we respond promptly to a customer complaint? If I take a case and it has a date, and then every case comment has a date, and I'm saying, hey, mask all my dates. So I may change dates so significantly that that case may now look to AI as a case that violated our internal service level agreements, right? It's a very simple example of that. And this holds true for, for currencies, for social, for a lot of this sort of confidential information, right? If I change someone's date of birth and they were minor before but they're not now, so all of that has ramifications when you're testing AI. And so we had customers who have this problem, particularly when they mask data and even with AI solutions that have a built-in masking layer. So we've added semantic masking. And like I mentioned, this is a proprietary algorithm that we've written. And the idea is that, we are masking with a variance that is basically taking away the real identifiable information, but it's not introducing an unexpected kind of variance in the kind of response that you would have expected from LLM. And this works really, really well in terms of testing your AI solutions in sandboxes and then deploying it in production, knowing that your LLM is giving appropriate results, your prompts are written correctly, all of those things you can enable while still being respectful of the privacy and sensitivity of your customer data. And we have added this to all of our products. So whether you are doing data retention, masking using GPT-5 AI, this is incorporated in all of our products. Doug, any comments you have on this?
I think this is a very, very clever capability that Cloud Compliance and GTP5 have come up with, because semantic masking is something I hadn't thought about. But when you are masking your data before sending it off to AI, you really need to make sure that you don't change the meanings of things. And that's a bit of a challenge when you're masking the data. So, very, very clever protocols and design. Sorry, top marks, mate. This is a fantastic feature. And I think all AI solutions should have this. I'm not sure they do, but definitely GTP5 does. So, congratulations on that one.
Thank you so much. I'm just starting to look at the comments here. I don't know, Doug, if you have had an opportunity to look. There's a bunch of comments on LinkedIn. I'm just going to read, but if you want to respond to, I think Stacy asked something.
Yep. We've
Uh,
been answering as we go along. So I have no problem at all.
okay. Do you want to just elaborate out here, Doug, for the benefit of people who are just on the streaming part of the video?
Yeah, no worries. So the questions were around masking in production. Sorry, if you have masking and you're doing a data warehouse connection, for example, how does that work? Well, the answer is that you don't mask your production information. You're masking your sandboxes. And so this is different to AI masking. We're talking about masking your sandboxes to obfuscate, to hide, to obscure your production data in your sandboxes. So because your data warehouse is generally running off the um, production environment, masking is not done in production. Otherwise, you can't see your real data. That's the whole point. So masking is only done in your sandboxes for that particular case. Semantic masking is not permanent. Semantic masking is for AI. When it passes the request through to the large language model, you want to hide the production environment data, but then when it comes back, you convert it back to the real stuff. This is semantic masking is very, very different to data masking in sandboxes. So hopefully that one clears that up. And there was a question earlier about BYOK. That means bring your own key. So when you have encryption, BYOK means you can bring your own key rather than having the Salesforce infrastructure actually generate you a purely random key. Um, BYOK means you bring your own. They're the two main questions we've had so far. So thank you for asking, folks, and please keep them coming.
Yeah, and I wanted to add a little bit more. I think, Stacey, I'm looking at your question on, you know, we may be masking data and it may be going down to a data warehouse or it may impact data integrations. So this is actually a real use case for, in fact, one of our customers in Australia. Uh, very, very large organization. I think one of the largest insurance companies there. And what they needed to do was they wanted to mask their sandbox, and they also were masking some other non Salesforce system. And those two systems have a data integration. So, what they wanted to make sure is that even after masking, these integrations could work. So, for example, if I was masking social security number and I changed a customer's social security number from 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 to 9 9 9 9 9 9 9, right? It will break. Bad idea to do integration this way, by the way, but nonetheless, it will break an integration if your integration was running on that piece of customer information. And what we do in Data Masker is that you can actually have deterministic masking. You can put your own sort of encryption if you wanted. So we are doing a very deterministic masking where we are always replacing A with one, for example, right? So we are making sure that we are applying the same algorithm as they are using in a disconnected system, so that from a data integration perspective or from in an integration point of view, if a third party system calls this system and this system, even though they're both sandbox or test systems, they're going to get identical information, or information will be matched based on some common shared key from customer information. So it's sort of a one-off case, but the idea here is, again, as a product builder, our emphasis is on how do we offer an extreme amount of flexibility to organizations. And I've particularly seen financial services, insurance, just broadly the more sort of regulated sector customers have very sort of unique and nuanced requirements beyond the run of the mill, big box, click a button and it'll mask data. And we've been very fortunate that we end up working with a lot of large, complex enterprise customers. That is kind of our thing. And we do that for AI, we do that for masking, for data retention, right to be forgotten, portability. Because across all of those four areas and four products that we have, we had to add a lot of these kind of things. So whether it's semantic masking, sort of the deterministic masking that I was talking about, and a bunch of other features that I'm frankly not even aware if there are other products that do. And so much of that I have to thank our customers and partners like Doug for, because it's their thinking, their requirements, their nuances that have driven us, to evolve these products. So with that, one quick shout out. There is a LinkedIn group that you can go to. This one, and it's a group with a whole lot of Salesforce folks and people who are interested in sort of the enterprise space. And you can join this group, and we do share information here from time to time. Links to this webinar would be there, things like that. So please feel free to join it. It's a great way to just kind of keep tabs on what we are doing, the sort of things we are hearing from customers and such. Also, I would encourage, if we are not connected, would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Same goes for Doug, and we can go from there. Doug, anything you'd like to add to this?
No, the Enterprise Dreaming event was quite powerful. I think a lot of people got a lot of things out of it. So that's a really good group to join. And I look forward to seeing people on LinkedIn as well. So thanks very much for the plug, Saurabh. And I think we should be getting towards the Q&A section now. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to either add them into the LinkedIn post and we will get to them right now, or if we don't, we can get to them afterwards. But at least we can answer your questions. If not today, we'll answer them as soon as we possibly can. So we're going to be sharing some other information with you on the post as well. That'll be coming out a bit later on today. Back to you, Saurabh.
Yep, I think I'm not seeing any other questions. If there's anybody in the cloud compliance team, if you want to just add a comment somewhere or let us know if there are any questions. Uh, Doug, anything that comes to your mind that we may not have covered?
Not really. I think we've covered off a lot of really good information in a quite short period of time. So apologies if it was a bit of a brain dump for you. But in a nutshell, make sure your data is minimized access inside your company. So keep your data safe that way. Make sure you employ things like API access control, which are free, which will help you stop bad actors attaching apps to your Salesforce org. And if you're using AI, GTPTify seriously can do some fantastic work with you, and the ability to stop sending production data to your large language model, but still giving it context is a very powerful feature. So I think they're the three main takeaways from this environment I think people should take. So thank you very much for your time, folks, and hand back to Saurabh for finally wrapping up.
Likewise, appreciate the time. I know data security, particularly for Salesforce, is super important area, specifically for financial services, insurance, and other regulated sector customers. If you work with those kind of customers, if you're employed there, or if you're a consultant who work with them, happy to connect. Just chat about these things. If you're interested in what services Platinum 7 offers or what we do, please do reach out to us. Again, if there are other comments or questions, definitely keep adding to the LinkedIn. Uh, Doug and I are both fairly active there, and we are going to respond to them as they come along. Again, thank you so much for your time. Have a great day or evening.
Thank you very much. Cheers.